Welcome to another episode of Sean's Take on Asia. I am here with Amir, and he is a new friend of mine whom we met with in the Middle East just recently. But I had the pleasure of hosting Amir in our office today in Hong Kong since he is visiting for a few days. I mean, you've got such an amazing and interesting background that a lot of us don't have. You're a career diplomat. You were stationed here as the Consulate General for Egypt. And you've also been stationed in Europe and also in, I think, in South America as well.
Yep.
You want to share a little bit about how you got to this point and what were some of those experiences like?
Well, hello, new friend, and happy to be in Hong Kong. I actually live here still on a regular basis. I've traveled everywhere. I'm a nomad. I was actually even born in Europe. And my diplomatic career, that part of my life, was in many continents.
Right.
So I've been to Latin America twice. I come from Africa. Egypt is part of Africa, but
Yes.
I've done other parts of Africa as well. And I grew up in Australia. I was educated in Australia. So I've been around, and then I completed the whole circle here in Hong Kong, where I was the Consul General for Hong Kong and Macau. It is fascinating that we are here sitting now with this background, trying to think about whether the diplomatic life is much richer than outside. What you do mostly is sales, pretty much.
Sales?
No, because you're selling your country. You promote your country.
Okay, right.
So in some aspect, you are acting. So you represent your country in a certain way. Of course, you have a lot of restrictions because you have to do a proper job. You are not really traveling in that country in your own capacity. So, so from that, so what I've did is build relations all my life. So what you do is you build relations with people. They know you for many years. And then you come back to this country, you learn a lot from it. You take that back home, and it really is people to people what makes the difference in our world through history. So, I guess I was in the business of sales, even though it didn't sound like that. And it was very interesting from the fact that you can turn policies or try to convert on the ground experiences or demands or requests or understanding of other countries into policies by people who have not been to that region.
Right.
So
Right.
that translation or crossing those bridges is not as easy as it seems.
So I'm actually very curious, since the fact that you mentioned you were in sales, in a kind of sales mode. In sales, obviously, there are KPIs, how many clients you signed up, and what's the revenue target, and so on and so forth. But in that capacity, is it more economic growth? How do you even measure that from a results perspective?
Traditionally, it was the whole business of promoting relations before the globalization or media was people going as envoys to that country. And to the extent that I think one of the things is that when you took messages from as you represent the highest authority of that country to the other one as a messenger, sometimes I think they cut their hair and they would put the message and they grow their hair. So it evolved from that, which was mostly developing that relationship at the highest level, representing the highest level of your country when there was not much travel, to now, today, you can hardly keep up with the news.
That's right.
Normally, when you're in a country, you are monitoring the policies, what their requirements are, promoting tourism, promoting culture, promoting education, exchange. The world has almost moved on.
Right.
It's now these leaders, which met very infrequently before, are now meeting 2 or 3 times a month in many. So we had to promote cultural ties. So, of course, coming from Egypt is quite easy because we have the pyramids, we have the pyramids, so everyone is interested.
Long history.
I know. So for me, it was a much easier job than anyone else because everyone is interested in what you got. So whatever you gave them, it sounded wow, cool and whatever. So that was the cultural part. And then you had the economic part.
Yeah.
And then that some of the countries have economic offices with trained people in the business area. Those were KPIs, like how many can you do a year, what have you, and how many companies were you able to bring over. I think it changes according to your financial ability as a country.
Yeah.
And how well you're represented abroad.
Yeah.
If you have enough resources to have a proper economic office that can promote trade or can send delegations or what have you, then probably the KPIs would be a bit more. Now, there is a structural framework which is numbers and MOUs and things like that.
Yeah.
In my business, I did a lot of MOUs. A lot of them never resulted in much. When there is a business, then things come together. And I think the last 20 odd years, because of the flow of information, if the business, I used to tell this to some of my colleagues, if this businessman came to us, it means he wasn't good enough to find out his own business. Because really, it's all out there. You know what you need. And if you're serious enough, of course, some people actually do know that they need to come to China, just don't know who to talk to and how to talk to how the regulator is. They hear news. So your business is mostly to help your people understand how to navigate that market, but also where you're accredited.
Yes.
Is to explain easier and more quickly how it is to the advantages that you have over other markets.
Right. Really fascinating. I mean, your home country, Egypt. I've always been a history buff, so I always love ancient history, especially. Obviously, I come from one, and then obviously Egypt is the other even more well-known one from a world perspective. I remember going to Egypt and going through the Nile and looking out the window. I was on the Nile cruise and looking out the window, thinking, "Well, this view that I'm seeing has probably been there for 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years, and a lot of that cultural aspect is still retained. But yet, there's so much else that has been already developed. And going through a country like that made me really appreciate, all of the past generations and everything that they have to go through to get to this point. And I think a lot of the cultural exchanges that we see are very much around that. And I think you as a career as a diplomat, a lot of that is really trying to appreciate the two sides and then trying to find opportunities where those the two sides can actually work together. And I think that kind of culminated to our last trip, right? So just a few weeks ago, we had a Hong Kong delegation trip led by Invest Hong Kong, and we visited first into Oman. I have never been to Oman. I've been to 43 countries before Oman.
Wow.
And I have never been to Oman. And even though that was a very short 2 days, and thanks to you made a lot of introductions to us, to meet with the governments, meet with the investment authorities, and so on. But to me, that is really cultural exchange, right? Because a lot of our delegation, including myself, didn't know much about the country, but also we were very pleasantly surprised how much is actually going on and how much synergy potentially there can be. Yeah. How did you get involved in Oman? Were you stationed there before, or it just happened to be an area that you also discovered there are opportunities, and this is how you're transitioning now into the next phase of what you're working on?
Well, because I've traveled for my entire life, and I had a few stints in tourism and other businesses. I believe in building bridges, and I believe that's the way that we can connect.
Right.
And so you need to know the people, you need to know the culture and a bit about the history, because that gives you how they behave. And then you find areas where we behave in a similar way. So I can relate a lot to, and my family and my son went to university here. I can relate to how the Chinese see things,
right?
How they see the world, because it's a very similar way for ancient civilizations, and how the world, when it changes, how everything also changes as well. We are all humans, so the tummy is the part where it all starts. So people over food, trust, flexibility to understand the other one without the misconceptions or the stereotyping of media or what we grew up, for many reasons, thinking of other cultures or other people or other colors. Oman came through, so after I finished my diplomatic career here, I actually started consulting here in Hong Kong for some families, and most of my work was to work with the Middle East. Now, the interest was mostly into the Gulf. For financial reasons and for cultural reasons. I curate and accompany friends, which is my new hobby, and I'll probably be doing that much more.
Right.
So sharing those moments and then introducing them to the experiences, location, the food, the people, and then you get a rich, and then everything else comes, business or what have you. So we were doing a lot of visits to the Gulf because of the demand here in Hong Kong. My idea is you have to understand the whole region, the different economies, the regulations or whatever, but it's one market. The GCC is one market.
Right.
It is not just the UAE. It's not just Saudi Arabia. You can operate in one location. You can set up your company in another location. You can have a market in another location and access. The Gulf is borderless in terms of economy, so
it's
you can
deal EU style.
Deal with a 70. Okay. So when you go to the Gulf, you should look at 70 million population, and then find the best location that fits what you're doing. So unfortunately, then the mapping of the region would take a bit longer. But if you had local knowledge that can help you understand better where the power of each of these blocks. Now, they are very closely related also to North Africa because of the Arabic connection. So then you have the bigger markets, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Nigeria, and then you open up a whole total different chain. We were experiencing a lot of geopolitics now. So you've got a big tussle on who goes where. So relocating and being closer to that region is probably something that we advise and we agree on. That's very important. So in doing that, then you need a more comprehensive understanding. And it starts with the people. So in Oman, that's why we did the first day as a culture trip, because then you can feel the size of the country, the difference in architecture, the way that people behave. And that then helps you probably save time and money on how you navigate that region. And, there's also the language, but we'll come to that later.
But it was quite interesting that after Oman, we went to the UAE, visited Dubai, went to Dubai FinTech Summit, and then also went to Abu Dhabi. And to me, it was quite interesting when I turned on the TV. Of course, the person that I see on TV in the UAE at the same time that we were there was President Trump. So exactly to your point, like I think a lot of folks have kind of told me the Middle East have become kind of the new intermediary ground, and UAE especially is trying to play that new Switzerland role. Everyone is coming to them. Everyone is trying to do deals through the country. Of course, there's still a lot to explore, but it was quite interesting. Like I was telling folks, I was in the Middle East, and they're like, "Wait, are you there with Trump?" I'm like, "No."
You said you were there with Trump. Yeah, I saw that.
Maybe sharing the same highway, but other than that, but it's interesting how there's so much things that are happening, and especially, I'm in the digital asset space, and UAE has been, especially Dubai and Abu Dhabi, have been so progressive in pushing forward regulatory frameworks. And also economic incentives, allowing and bringing talent into the country in order to really innovate around this industry. Obviously, here in Hong Kong, we have also been known as a very progressive hub from a digital asset perspective. Maybe playing a slightly different role since we are we are the gateway into China. So there's a lot of trade related things sitting on top of that digital asset industry that are being worked on. But I think there's a lot of potential in terms of the Middle East and the greater China region, where the manufacturing center, the export center, now the innovation, the AI, and then leveraging that central hub location. I mean, it is called the Middle East for a reason. It is in the middle. I actually, what I find was being in the Middle East for that week, doing calls with folks in the U.S. and also doing calls with folks in Hong Kong.
It's a good.
It's a very good time zone. So you've done a lot of work in this space. What are you seeing? What are some of the interesting opportunities that you think could actually have a higher chance of materializing if we obviously put the work into it?
So the Middle East is a political term that was invented in the West. So whatever is east
Right.
to them. So
Right.
there was the Near East, Middle East, and Far East.
Right.
So they categorized us in the Middle East. At the time of this political term,
Yeah.
there hadn't been so much money coming out of the Gulf in terms of wealth. Now that this accumulated wealth is now very well settled and
Nice.
visible
Yeah.
and recognized,
Yeah.
and that's we all saw what President Trump was doing, and but everyone was always relating the Arabs, or especially the Gulfies, as like not very sophisticated people, and you can just go and dig the gold and leave.
Yes.
And perhaps that was a stage where they needed to invest or put their money safely somewhere else. Now everything's changed. Now they're into nation building. They're into bringing all of it in. Now the geopolitics are going back to the Switzerland of the area or whatever. Probably. In addition to the UAE, Oman is the Switzerland in terms of political maneuvering and what have you, and talks between the Iranians and the Americans at the moment are in Oman, and then when the Israelis were talking to the Saudis also behind closed doors. So size matters. So size in terms of geography and location. Where is it located? And normally, if you're located near an entry to an ocean, whatever, so it's important to everyone else, to the Americans or to China, for the Belt and Road and access to trade. Traditionally, we've had very good relations with the East. That has changed after the dominance of the white man, after the colonialist period, and America doesn't want to let that go. Well, China was always not interested in being number one. China was interested in growing, building relations, mutual respect, and what have you. So it was what you call win-win, which actually is a cliche, but it really is true. And any relationship relies on that.
Yeah.
Now, how much I win and you, but the thing about it is that then China feels, because it was closed for a while, was misunderstood. It really is, and I can say that from experience personally. It is misunderstood and it's misinterpreted, and that, as are the Arabs. So now we finally are in a different stage,
Right.
where China is becoming a lot more international. It is looking for new allies and new friends. The Middle East was caught in its own dynamic, the Arabs and the Palestinian issue and what have you. The Arab world is also wants to diversify its means. It does not want to be fully dependent on the West for many reasons. And they are looking to the East. And in China, they find a way to look into the future. So I really am very excited about innovation, other tools than the traditional ones. Now, what the main problem remains always is where do people look forward to, like, what is the utopia of the world? Like, where do I want my kids? Where are my kids going to make more money?
Right.
Where can I get the best medical care? So plan B, where do I live? And it was always like, I send my kids to Western, American universities. They were much more advanced, or they were selling that they were more advanced because the dominance of the English language.
Right.
So,
I don't know about with the whole Harvard thing. I don't know if that's true anymore.
So you have. I mean, we're not going to get very political in this because it can go. But these are facts, and these are facts that we can now. I mean, now that I'm not a government civil servant anymore, I can actually then discuss these things with a bit more transparency. The dominance or the control of one culture over others is probably was not very conducive to the world that we live in or to the future generations. We need a more balanced world where we need to exchange with each other much better and get closer and respect each other's culture. And that's the business I'm in, whether it's by taking people around or so you build these bridges in different areas. As we were discussing before we started recording, is we need to get a hub in a region that has a different approach of how to get the right people to sit together and have this conversation.
Right.
And then when you sit, not with me, with someone more with a better ground in your business, things will happen then over a meal, over tea, or a drink.
Right.
And then that's where you find solutions, and that's where you build for the future. That's my personal.
I see a lot of, because many of us that were originally in traditional finance moved into digital asset and crypto, and now are already seeing the blurring of the lines in between, right?
Of course.
There's only so far you can go being an entirely enclosed kind of crypto industry that's, essentially in an inner circle. In order for it to get bigger, and really in order for the innovation that really underpin the entire industry to expand, you have to bring in traditional finance, right? You have to bring in...
Everyone has to be on board.
Everyone has to be on board, right? And as I told you, I'm in the stablecoin business. What is a stablecoin? It's basically digitizing money.
Yeah.
Money is a traditional form of, monetary exchange. I'm just digitizing it, putting on the blockchain.
No, I'm government. No, I'm not going to let you do that.
I'm not government anymore.
You're going to come to me, I get the money, and then I decide who I give it to.
Well, but the funny part, though, irony aside, while this technology and this new form of money originated originally in the crypto space, in order for you to essentially have a form of currency that can switch in and out of crypto assets, which could be very volatile. But now, with regulation coming in, especially in this space with stablecoin, also now the government is now bringing in oversight to ensure that consumer and investor protections are there while this form of new money can still thrive. So I think it is a maturing industry.
Yep.
But the point I'm trying to make, though, is now that you have traditional finance, you have government, you have regulatory, and obviously you still have the innovation aspect, this is actually where we need to find locations and economies where this new form of monetary transfer can actually benefit. And I think based on a lot of what you shared, in the GCC, in the UAE, in Oman, there might be a lot of opportunities for all of us.
You remember when we met in Oman, they were introducing the new city, the Sultan Haitham city.
Yes.
So Oman, of course, to compete in terms of real estate with the machine that's been selling in the UAE, it's quite difficult. You remember the guy actually came up with that idea. Said, so this could be the digitalization, the tokenization, the blockchain. These non-traditional forms of like carrying cash or putting it in one country, or actually getting a few people to buy parts, whatever. All these innovative ideas can allow markets like this to compete. And in a non-traditional way. And in the process, then the regulator, even if it's slowly behind, or the government's still suspicious of the process or not understanding or whatever, can become part of the community.
Right.
Because then it meets this, but you need to come more than once, and you need to talk to them, and that's why we're in the business. It's the follow-up. The follow-up and building on these conversations where the trade knows how to flow.
That's right.
All the things, but politics do not change very much. National interests are somehow a bit rigid, but it's the people who look into the future that can create alternatives or have a duty to help.
That's right.
And enjoy the elements. That's really pretty. There's a lot of fun to do too.
Yeah, if you're part of the industry growing and you're part of bringing two economies together through that technology, that is something that I would be proudly to work on. It's something that really excites me. It's not just creating something fancy and say, hey, look, shiny object. No, it's got lasting potential.
You're changing. I mean, this is changing everything we knew. I mean, what's happening in the last few years, and the UAE adopting this because of the size. They're quite small. They have to come. They have to have an advantage, and the Saudis following now, and the resources that they have that they can put into this because of all the inflow of money from people who are moving to that region. From everyone is there now. Then you can then become part of change. I mean, this is really like this moment. I think is changing the whole.
This is the time. This is the time.
No, absolutely.
This is the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful to have you on with us on this episode. Share a lot of your insight, your knowledge, and also your incredible career, which made you into who you are now, the people connector, building bridges between different economies. I think there's a lot more for us to learn. I know a lot of folks keep saying, oh, the UAE, the Middle East is thriving. There's so much going on. But they always need people that really understand and appreciate both sides, because you can't just go in and barge in and say, hey, here we are, take us for what we are. You have to be able to work in a certain way. And I think people like you that are really helping a lot of businesses, given your vast experience, is really going to be very helpful. So thank you. Thank you for
so kind.
Sharing these insights with us.
No, thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to help, because it's just so vibrant at the moment that you need to find a way of how to make an impact and be part of it. And we need to get you more, and we need to cover more areas. I think the more areas that we exchange with this part will make it a lot easier for people when they actually land.
Trade it's not between A and B only. There's C, there's D, there's E, there's F.
Business and pleasure. Business and pleasure is my idea.
Yeah, excellent. That's all we have for this episode of Sean's Take on Asia. If you like this content, please follow me on LinkedIn and as well as on YouTube. Until next time, we'll talk more about additional new economies, new regions, and also new exciting innovations in the digital asset space.